They make fun of him because of his disability, but he becomes a true hero when the school's toughest kid starts to reveal a dangerous secret. Lucas Thompson limped down the crowded hallway of Westfield High, his cane tapping steadily against the polished linoleum floor. At 16, he felt more like an outcast than a typical teenager, his leg brace creaking softly with each step, a constant reminder of his disability. As he neared his locker, the familiar stares and whispers trailed him like a shadow, making him painfully aware of his difference. The taunts were relentless, and today was no exception. "Hey, Limpy Luke!" a voice jeered, accompanied by the laughter of jocks lounging against the lockers. Lucas gritted his teeth, trying to focus on opening his locker despite his trembling fingers. Just as he managed to unlock the door, Tyler Johnson, the school's star quarterback, slammed it shut, nearly catching Lucas's fingers. "Oops, my bad," Tyler sneered, his cronies laughing on cue. The insult stung, but Lucas's cheeks burned more from the humiliation than the words themselves. Before he could react, Sarah Chen, his best friend since elementary school, stepped in. Her eyes flashed with defiance as she confronted Tyler, her petite frame a considerable contrast to his towering figure. "Leave him alone, Tyler," she demanded, her voice cutting through the laughter. Tyler's smirk faltered, but he quickly recovered, mocking Sarah's loyalty to Lucas. Sarah's response was swift and sharp. "And you could do so much better than being a pathetic person? But here we are." Dismissing Tyler, she helped Lucas gather his books as the bell rang, signaling the start of first period. The crowd began to disperse, leaving Lucas with a mix of gratitude and frustration. "You don't have to keep defending me, Sarah," he mumbled, eyes downcast. "It only makes them target you too." Sarah nudged his shoulder gently, careful not to unbalance him. "That's what friends are for," she replied, her voice softening as she reassured him of his worth, urging him not to let the kid's words affect him. Despite Sarah's encouragement, Lucas couldn't shake the feeling of being a burden. The previous night, he had overheard his parents arguing about the cost of his medical bills, and the guilt weighed heavily on him. As they entered their English classroom, Lucas caught a glimpse of his reflection in the window, a lanky boy with messy brown hair and glasses, leaning on a cane that seemed to define him in everyone else's eyes. Mrs. Patel, their English teacher, greeted them warmly and praised Lucas's recent essay on resilience in literature, specifically his analysis of Tiny Tim. For a brief moment, Lucas felt a spark of pride, appreciating the rare acknowledgement of his strengths. In the classroom, Lucas found solace in his academic abilities, where his mind could shine free from physical limitations. As he settled into his seat, he dared to hope that today might be different, that he might escape the constant reminders of his differences. But as the room filled with students, the sidelong glances and poorly concealed smirks made it clear that his hope was futile. Lucas opened his notebook, retreating into the comfort of words and ideas, imagining a story of a hero who rose above adversity. Little did he know, his own journey was just beginning, a journey that would challenge everything he thought he knew about himself and the world around him. The crisp autumn air nipped at Lucas's face as he crossed the school courtyard, the fallen leaves crunching beneath his feet and cane. The vibrant reds and golds underfoot contrasted sharply with the dread that weighed on him. As he approached the fountain, Lucas spotted Ethan Roberts surrounded by his usual group of admirers. Ethan's laughter carried across the yard, a sound that made Lucas's stomach churn. Catching sight of Lucas, Ethan called out mockingly, "Well, well, if it isn't our resident gimp. Careful not to trip on all these leaves, Limpy." The crowd around Ethan chuckled as their leader's eyes locked onto Lucas. The familiar taunts brought a flush to Lucas's cheeks, his grip tightening on his cane. He tried to hurry past, but Ethan was not finished. With a swift motion, Ethan stuck out his foot, sending Lucas sprawling onto the hard concrete. Pain shot through Lucas's leg as his books scattered around him. Laughter erupted from the group as Ethan feigned innocence, dangling Lucas's cane just out of reach. "What's wrong, Lucas?" Can't get up without your little stick? Before Lucas could respond, a voice cut through the laughter. Olivia Chen, Sarah's older sister and the student body president, pushed through the crowd. She grabbed the cane from Ethan and helped Lucas to his feet, her voice laced with disgust. This isn't funny. It's pathetic. Ethan's smirk faltered briefly, but he quickly regained his composure, dismissing Olivia's reprimand as harmless fun. Lucas mumbled a response, avoiding eye contact as he gathered his belongings. Olivia shot Ethan a final glare before guiding Lucas away from the group. As they walked away, Olivia asked if Lucas was okay, offering to take him to the nurse. Embarrassed, Lucas declined, mumbling his thanks without meeting her eyes. Olivia gave his shoulder a reassuring squeeze before heading to her next class, leaving Lucas alone with his thoughts. By the time he reached his computer science class, Lucas was grateful for the refuge the classroom provided. Mr. Dawson, his computer science teacher, greeted him with a nod, asking about his coding project. For the first time that day, Lucas felt a spark of enthusiasm as he pulled out his laptop to show his progress. In the world of coding, his disability didn't matter. Mr. Dawson listened intently, offering praise that momentarily lifted Lucas's spirits. But as class ended, doubt crept back in. What did it matter if he was good at coding, when people like Ethan always seemed to win in the real world? As Lucas packed up his things, he caught sight of his reflection in the computer screen. The dark circles under his eyes told the story of sleepless nights spent replaying every cruel taunt and shove. The boy staring back at him was a shell of the bright, outgoing kid he used to be. With a heavy sigh, Lucas shouldered his backpack, gripped his cane, and braced himself for whatever awaited him in the hallways beyond the classroom door. The final bell rang, marking the end of another exhausting day at Westfield High. Lucas shuffled out of the building, his shoulders hunched under the weight of his backpack and the world's expectations. The crisp autumn air bit at his cheeks as he began his solitary journey home, the familiar tap of his cane echoing with each step. As he rounded the corner onto Maple Street, something caught his eye. Jamie Peterson, a quiet classmate, stood unnervingly close to the curb, his posture sending a chill down Lucas's spine. Before Lucas could call out, the roar of an engine shattered the quiet afternoon. A red sports car hurtled down the street, well over the speed limit. Time seemed to slow as Lucas watched Jamie take an unconscious step forward, teetering on the edge of the curb. Without thinking, Lucas surged forward, forgetting his cane as he pushed his aching muscles to their limit. "Jamie!" he yelled, his voice raw with urgency, but Jamie remained frozen, caught in the headlights of the oncoming car. In a burst of adrenaline, Lucas reached Jamie just in time, grabbing the back of his hoodie and yanking him backward. They tumbled onto the hard concrete, just as the car whooshed past, leaving only the acrid smell of burning rubber. For a moment, all Lucas could hear was the pounding of his heart and Jamie's ragged breathing. As reality set in, Jamie whispered in shock, You saved my life." Lucas, still processing what had just happened, could only nod, his mind reeling from the near miss. A crowd began to gather, drawn by the commotion. Mrs. Hernandez from the corner store rushed over, phone in hand, ready to call 911. As the adrenaline wore off, Lucas felt the pain radiate through his body. His bad leg throbbed, and he noticed a warm trickle of blood on his elbow. But none of that mattered as he looked at Jamie, alive and unharmed. Jamie, still in shock, muttered, "I didn't see the car. How did you move so fast?" Lucas could only shake his head, struggling to explain the protective instinct that had taken over. Sirens wailed in the distance as Mr. Thompson, Lucas's neighbor, arrived, exclaiming how incredible the rescue had been. As Lucas was helped to his feet and his cane retrieved, he noticed the murmurs around him. "Did you see that? The kid with the cane, he saved him." For the first time in years, the stares directed at Lucas were not of pity or mockery, but of admiration and respect. A warmth spread through Lucas's chest, a feeling of pride. For once, his disability hadn't defined him. His actions had. As he sat in the back of the ambulance watching Jamie reunite with his tearful parents, Lucas felt a shift within himself. The weight of self-doubt seemed to lift, if only a little, allowing him to hope that maybe, just maybe, things could be different. The fluorescent lights of Westfield High's main hallway seemed unusually bright as Lucas made his way to his locker the next morning. The usual sound of his cane tapping against the linoleum was drowned out by an unexpected buzz of excitement. As he approached, Lucas noticed a small crowd gathered near his locker, and their heads turned in unison as they spotted him. "There he is!" someone shouted, and suddenly Lucas was surrounded by a sea of smiling faces. Hands reached out to pat his back, and voices overlapped in a chorus of praise and questions. For a moment, Lucas felt dizzy from the sudden attention, struggling to process the dramatic shift in his social standing. Megan Tran, the debate team captain, pushed through the crowd to stand in front of him. "Lucas, that was incredible what you did yesterday. Would you consider giving a speech at our next assembly about bravery?" she asked. Before Lucas could respond, Jack Freeman, a hulking linebacker who had never acknowledged him before, clapped a hand on his shoulder. "Dude, you've got to sit with us at lunch. The whole team wants to hear about how you saved Jamie. That was some superhero stuff." As Lucas stammered out responses, trying to navigate this unfamiliar territory, he caught sight of Sarah pushing her way through the throng. Her face was a mix of pride and concern as she finally reached his side. "Give him some space, guys," she said firmly, creating a small bubble around them. "He's still recovering, you know." The crowd reluctantly dispersed, but not before several more students shouted words of admiration. Lucas leaned against his locker, feeling slightly overwhelmed. "This is weird," he muttered to Sarah, who offered him a sympathetic smile. "Yeah, but weird in a good way, right?" she replied, her eyes twinkling. "You deserve this, Lucas. You've always been a hero to me, and now everyone else can see it too." She squeezed his arm gently before heading to her class, leaving Lucas to ponder this new reality. As he made his way to English class, Lucas noticed that even the teachers were treating him differently. Mrs. Patel beamed at him as he entered the room, inviting him to her desk. "Lucas, I heard about your brave act yesterday," she said warmly. "I always knew you had great potential, but this is truly remarkable. Would you consider writing an essay about your experience for the school paper?" Throughout the morning, Lucas was bombarded with similar requests and accolades. Students who had never given him the time of day were now vying for his attention, hanging on his every word as he recounted the previous day's events. For the first time in years, Lucas felt visible, valued, even admired. But as lunchtime approached, a nagging feeling began to gnaw at his newfound contentment. Something felt off, though he couldn't quite put his finger on it. When he scanned the cafeteria, his eyes landed on Ethan's usual table, where the popular crowd was laughing and joking, as always. But Ethan was conspicuously absent. Frowning, Lucas spotted Ethan sitting alone at a corner table, his food untouched. The usual cockiness that defined Ethan was gone, replaced by a sullen, almost haunted expression. Their eyes met across the crowded room, and for a brief moment, Lucas saw something flicker in Ethan's gaze. Guilt, perhaps, or fear. Before he could decipher it, Ethan abruptly stood up and left the cafeteria, leaving his tray behind. Lucas watched him go, a seed of unease taking root in his stomach. "Hey, Lucas!" Jack's booming voice snapped him out of his thoughts. "Come on, man! We saved you a seat!" Lucas hesitated for a moment, glancing between the exit Ethan had used and the table of eager faces waiting for him. With a small sigh, he pushed his concerns aside and joined his new admirers. As he sat down, Lucas couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. The seed of doubt grew stronger, whispering that perhaps this sudden change wasn't as simple as it seemed. But for now, he allowed himself to enjoy the moment. As the sun set, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Lucas made his way to the school library, having stayed late to work on a group project. The The halls were eerily quiet, his cane tapping rhythmically against the floor, the sound echoing in the stillness. As he approached the library doors, hushed voices caught his attention. Lucas recognized Ethan's voice immediately, low and controlled, prompting him to slow his pace and strain to hear the conversation. "I'm telling you, it almost went sideways," Ethan said, frustration evident in his tone. Lucas wasn't supposed to be the hero. He was supposed to take the fall. A chill ran down Lucas's spine as the meaning of Ethan's words began to sink in. Derek, Ethan's right-hand man, responded nervously. "But how were we supposed to know he'd move that fast? I mean, the guy uses a cane, for Christ's sake." Lucas's heart pounded in his ears as he pressed himself against the wall, trying to remain undetected. Ethan's next words made Lucas's blood run cold. The plan was perfect. Jamie was in on it. He was supposed to stumble into the road. Lucas would try to help, but be too slow. And then bam, instant villain. No one would have believed the school's disabled kid over the rest of us. The casual cruelty in Ethan's voice made Lucas's stomach churn. Derek hesitated, then voiced concern about the plan's risk. But Ethan dismissed it coldly. "That's why we made sure it was my cousin driving. He knew to swerve at the last second if things went south." Lucas was supposed to look like the bad guy, not come out a freaking hero. Lucas felt the floor tilt beneath him as the full implications of what he'd heard sank in. The accident, the heroism, the acceptance from his peers. It had all been a cruel setup designed to humiliate him. Betrayal, anger, and fear warred within him as he grappled with the realization that everything was built on a lie. Jamie, the boy he thought he'd saved, had been a part of it all. The admiration from his classmates was based on a deception intended to destroy him. For a moment, Lucas considered bursting into the library to confront Ethan and Derek, but fear held him back. Ethan had already demonstrated the lengths he was willing to go to hurt Lucas. What if Ethan escalated things further? And who would believe Lucas over the golden boy of Westfield High? Even if he did tell someone, what proof did he have beyond his word? As Ethan and Derek prepared to leave, Lucas made a split-second decision to slip away quietly, hiding in a nearby classroom until their footsteps faded. Once they were gone, Lucas emerged from his hiding spot, his mind reeling from the weight of the truth he now carried. The knowledge settled on his shoulders like a heavy burden, casting a shadow over his recent triumphs. As he stepped into the cool evening air, he gripped his cane tightly, a mix of determination and uncertainty swirling within him. The path forward was far from clear, but one thing was certain: nothing would ever be the same again. The soft glow of computer screens cast eerie shadows on Sarah's bedroom walls as Lucas sat hunched over her laptop, fingers flying across the keyboard. Sarah paced behind him, her brow furrowed in concentration as she scrolled through her phone. "Anything yet?" Lucas asked, not taking his eyes off the screen. Sarah shook her head in frustration. "Nothing concrete. Ethan's too smart to leave obvious traces on his public accounts." Lucas leaned back, rubbing his tired eyes. They'd been at this for hours, searching for digital breadcrumbs that could expose Ethan's plot. Sarah flopped onto her bed, her dark hair fanning out around her. "What about Jamie?" she suggested. "If he was in on it, maybe there's something on his phone or computer." A spark of inspiration hit Lucas. "That's it!" he exclaimed, sitting up straighter. "Jamie's the weak link. He seemed genuinely shaken after the incident. Maybe we can get him to crack." As they brainstormed ways to approach Jamie, Lucas marveled at Sarah's unwavering support. When he'd first told her what he'd overheard, she'd been skeptical, but her expression had shifted from doubt to determination as they delved deeper into the details. "We're going to need more than just Jamie's word," Sarah mused, hugging a pillow to her chest. "Ethan's got the whole school wrapped around his finger. We need hard evidence." Lucas nodded grimly and returned to the laptop. "I think I might have found something," he said, excitement and nerves tightening his voice. Sarah leaned in, eyes widening as she saw the screen. Lucas had access to a cache of deleted messages from Ethan's cloud storage. Though most were innocuous, a few hinted at the planned accident without explicitly stating anything incriminating. "It's not a smoking gun," Lucas sighed, "but it's a start." Sarah squeezed his shoulder encouragingly. "Keep digging. We'll find something concrete." As days passed, their investigation deepened. They set up a hidden camera in Lucas's backpack, hoping to catch Ethan or his cronies in an unguarded moment, and created fake social media accounts to infiltrate Ethan's inner circle. With each discovery, their unease grew. Ethan's influence seemed to extend far beyond the school walls, hinting at connections to local businesses, blackmail, and a network of loyal followers. One afternoon in the school library, Sarah's face went pale as she handed Lucas her phone, showing him a chilling, anonymous message. "Stop digging, or you'll regret it." A cold knot formed in Lucas's stomach. They'd been careful, but somehow Ethan had caught wind of their investigation. "We can't back down now," Lucas said, his voice low but firm. Sarah nodded, though fear flickered in her eyes. As they left the library, Lucas couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Doubts crept in that night as he lay in bed, but with a deep breath, he pushed them aside. There was still work to be done, evidence to uncover. Whatever the cost, Lucas knew he couldn't turn back now. The afternoon sun cast long shadows through the dusty windows of room 203 as Lucas stood near the teacher's desk, gripping his cane with sweaty palms. The ticking of the clock grew louder with each second, heightening his anxiety. When Ethan finally entered, casually slinging his Letterman jacket over his shoulder, Lucas's heart pounded. "What's this about, Limpy?" Ethan asked, his tone dripping with condescension. Steeling himself, Lucas confronted Ethan. "I know what you did, the accident, the setup, all of it. I have proof." He pulled a folder of printouts from his backpack. For a moment, surprise flickered across Ethan's face before he burst into laughter. "Proof? You think anyone's going to believe you?" Ethan mocked. His confidence was overwhelming, leaving Lucas feeling small and uncertain. Ethan snatched the folder from Lucas's hands, tearing it apart and scattering the papers across the floor. "You don't get it, do you?" Ethan sneered. "I own this school. Who's going to believe you over me?" Lucas's resolve wavered as Ethan's cruelty became more apparent. "Why did you do this?" Lucas asked, struggling to understand. Ethan leaned in, his voice menacing. "Because I could. People like you need to know their place." As Ethan laid out the depth of his influence, Lucas felt a chill run down his spine. "You won't get away with this," Lucas tried to assert, but Ethan dismissed him with another laugh. "I already have. My dad's on the school board, and half the cops owe him favors." "You're out of your league, kid." The door slammed shut behind Ethan, leaving Lucas reeling from the encounter. Gathering the scattered papers, Lucas realized the enormity of what he was up against. But instead of giving in to fear, a fierce determination took hold. He knew the fight against Ethan was just beginning, and he wouldn't back down. As he stepped into the afternoon sunlight, Lucas called Sarah, ready to plan their next move. The path ahead was uncertain and dangerous, but for the first time, Lucas felt truly alive and ready to face whatever came next. The harsh fluorescent lights of Principal Hawkins' office buzzed as Lucas finished his plea, laying out everything: Ethan's setup, the threats, and the evidence. His voice was hoarse from the effort, and he watched anxiously as Principal Hawkins leaned back in her chair, her expression unreadable. "Lucas," she began carefully, "these are very serious allegations. You understand that, don't you?" Lucas nodded, gripping his cane tightly. "Yes, ma'am. That's why I came to you. Ethan needs to be stopped." He pushed a folder of evidence across her desk. Principal Hawkins glanced at the folder but didn't open it. Instead, she sighed, removing her glasses to pinch the bridge of her nose. "Lucas, you have to understand the position this puts me in. Ethan Roberts comes from a very influential family. His father is on the school board, and his mother is the biggest donor to our athletics program. Lucas's heart sank. But that doesn't matter, right? If he's done something wrong, he should be punished. His desperation was evident. It's not that simple, Principal Hawkins replied, her tone softening slightly. Accusations like this could damage the school's reputation, not to mention the potential legal ramifications. Without irrefutable proof, she trailed off, leaving the implication hanging. Anger welled up in Lucas. So you're not going to do anything? You're just going to let him get away with it? His voice cracked with emotion. Hawkins leaned forward, sympathy and resignation in her eyes. I'll look into it discreetly, but I can't promise anything. In the meantime, focus on your studies and stay out of Ethan's way. Leaving the office, Lucas felt a crushing sense of defeat. He had put his faith in the system, only to have it fail him. Each step he took down the hallway felt heavy, burdened by the weight of injustice. Outside, the crisp autumn air did little to clear his head. Slumping onto a bench, Lucas called Sarah, recounting the meeting. Her initial disbelief quickly turned to outrage. That's it? They're not going to do anything? We need to take matters into our own hands. Lucas rubbed his temples, feeling a headache coming on. How? No one believes us, and Ethan's too powerful. After a pause, Sarah's voice returned with renewed determination. What if we didn't need anyone to believe us? What if we showed everyone the truth all at once? Intrigued, Lucas asked her to explain. Sarah proposed an anonymous online campaign, a website to share their evidence. It was risky, but it might be their only chance. Lucas agreed, and over the next few days they worked tirelessly on the digital exposé, ensuring everything remained anonymous. On a quiet Sunday evening, they were ready. Lucas hit publish, and they began spreading the link through fake social media accounts. At first, nothing happened. Then, like a spark hitting dry tinder, it began to spread. By Monday morning, as Lucas walked through the hallways, he felt the shift in the atmosphere. This time, the eyes following him were filled with awe, sympathy, and guilt. The cafeteria was filled with students huddled around their phones, faces illuminated by screens as they absorbed the revelations that had shaken the school. The usual cliques dissolved, replaced by a collective sense of shock and outrage. Lucas sat at his usual table, barely touching his lunch. Beside him, Sarah whispered, "I can't believe it worked." Her voice was a mix of awe and anxiety as she watched the students around them. Before Lucas could respond, a commotion at the cafeteria entrance drew their attention. Ethan burst through the doors, his face flushed with rage. "It's all lies," he shouted, desperation cracking his voice. The cafeteria fell silent as all eyes turned to him. The silence was short-lived, however, as voices soon erupted from every corner. "What about the messages, Ethan? How do you explain the video?" The barrage of questions quickly stripped away Ethan's bravado, revealing fear in his eyes as he searched the room for support, only to find his usual cronies avoiding eye contact. He backed out of the cafeteria, nearly stumbling in his haste to escape. Sarah whispered, "Did you see that?" with a note of triumph, but Lucas couldn't share her excitement. The weight of their actions and the potential consequences pressed down on him. As if on cue, the PA system crackled to life, and Principal Hawkins announced, "In light of recent events, all afternoon classes are canceled. There will be an emergency assembly tomorrow morning." The announcement plunged the cafeteria into chaos once more as students gathered their things, eager to discuss the unexpected turn of events. Lucas remained seated, feeling detached from the frenzy around him. "Are you okay?" Sarah asked, concern etched on her face. "I don't know," Lucas admitted. "We did it. We exposed Ethan. But what happens now?" As if in response, a group of students approached their table, led by Jamie, the boy Lucas had saved. His face was pale and his voice trembled as he apologized. "Ethan had dirt on me, but after you saved me, I couldn't live with the guilt anymore." One by one, other students began to confess their own experiences with Ethan, revealing the full extent of his cruelty. As the confessions continued, Lucas noticed Principal Hawkins standing at the cafeteria doors, her face ashen as she took in the scene. Their eyes met briefly before she turned and hurried away. The rest of the day passed in a blur, with news vans arriving and reporters seeking interviews. Lucas's phone buzzed incessantly with messages from classmates. But as Mr. Dawson informed him that Ethan had been suspended and legal action was being considered, Lucas felt a cold dread. The reality of the situation hit hard. Lucas knew this was far from over. As he left the school, he couldn't shake the feeling that he might have traded one set of problems for another, potentially more dangerous one. The morning sun cast long shadows as Lucas approached the school entrance. Noticing the usual chatter had turned to hushed conversations. Derek, one of Ethan's former cronies, stood by the railing, his eyes fixed on Lucas. Expecting more taunts, Lucas tensed, but as he got closer, he saw something unexpected in Derek's expression: shame. "Hey, Lucas," Derek muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. "Can we talk for a second?" Lucas cautiously nodded, leaning on his cane. Derek, lacking his usual bravado, seemed to shrink in on himself. I wanted to say I'm sorry," Derek stammered, "for everything. The way we treated you wasn't right. I see that now." Stunned by the unexpected apology, Lucas listened as Derek continued, admitting he always knew Ethan was a jerk, but never realized the extent of the harm caused. "What you did, it took guts, man. Real guts." Throughout the day, more students approached Lucas, offering apologies and support. Megan, who had once laughed at Ethan's cruel jokes, slid into the seat next to Lucas in math class and admitted she was wrong about him. "What you did made me realize how messed up things have been around here." For the first time in years, Lucas felt truly seen, not with pity, but with respect. At lunch, Lucas was surprised to find his once isolated corner table crowded with students. Sarah beamed with pride as Jamie nervously asked if he could join. As the group grew, stories and experiences were shared, revealing the struggles with intimidation and isolation that many had faced. "I never knew," Lucas murmured, amazed at how his classmates opened up. Alex, a freshman Lucas barely knew, pointed out, "We all thought we were alone. But thanks to you, Lucas, we're starting to see that we're not." The afternoon brought more surprises. In English class, Mrs. Patel announced a project focused on empathy and inclusion, giving Lucas a grateful glance. After school, students surrounded Lucas, eager to continue discussing their ideas. Suggestions flowed, starting a support group, organizing awareness campaigns. As they planned, Lucas marveled at the transformation. Just days ago, he had felt invisible, powerless. Now he was at the center of a movement, respected and valued. Walking home, Lucas felt lighter than he had in years, a newfound sense of purpose replacing the isolation that had haunted him. For the first time in a long while, Lucas looked forward to tomorrow. The auditorium had students filed in for the annual Westfield High Talent Show. Backstage, Lucas paced nervously, his cane tapping a rhythm on the floor. Clutching a crumpled paper, he silently rehearsed his spoken word piece. Sarah appeared beside him, concern in her eyes. "You okay?" she asked, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. Lucas nodded, trying to smile. "Just nerves," he muttered, glancing around the crowded backstage. "Ethan," Sarah added, her voice tense. Though suspended, Ethan's influence still loomed. A stagehand signaled Lucas to get ready. As he moved towards the stage, he thought he saw a familiar Letterman jacket in the shadows, but brushed it off, focusing on the task ahead. The spotlight hit him as he stepped onto the stage, the audience falling silent. "This piece is called Invisible No More," Lucas began, his voice surprisingly steady. Pouring his heart into the poem, he felt his confidence grow with each line, the audience responding with murmurs of agreement and applause. But then disaster struck. A sharp feedback squeal cut off the microphone. Lucas faltered, panic rising as the tech crew scrambled. The audience began to stir, but then Lucas caught sight of Sarah in the front row. She mouthed, "Keep going." Taking a deep breath, Lucas continued without the mic, his voice carrying powerfully across the room. He noticed Ethan lurking in the back, a malicious grin on his face. Fueled by anger, Lucas channeled his emotions into the performance, his voice growing stronger. Suddenly, one of Ethan's cronies shouted, "Hey, that's not true!" trying to disrupt the flow, but other students quickly defended Lucas, telling the hecklers to be quiet. Emboldened by the support, Lucas launched into the final stanza of his poem, his voice filling the auditorium. As he delivered the last line, the room fell into a heavy silence before erupting into applause. The audience rose to their feet, cheering and whistling. Through tear-blurred eyes, Lucas saw Ethan storm out of the auditorium, defeated. But Lucas barely registered it, overwhelmed by the wave of support washing over him. As he left the stage, Sarah and other newfound allies surrounded him in a group hug. Principal Hawkins approached Lucas, her face a mix of emotions. "Lucas," she began, her voice thick with emotion, "I owe you an apology. You've opened a lot of eyes, mine included. We need to do better, and with students like you leading the way, I believe we can." As the excitement of the moment began to fade, Lucas felt a profound sense of change. The fear and uncertainty that had once held him back seemed to vanish, replaced by newfound strength. In finding his voice, he realized he'd not only transformed himself, but sparked a revolution in the halls of Westfield High. The echoes of applause followed Lucas as he navigated the crowded hallway, students and teachers parting to let him pass, their faces beaming with admiration. Lucas felt lighter than ever, his cane barely touching the ground. Mr. Dawson, his computer science teacher, caught up to him, praising his performance and resilience. Before Lucas could respond, a small freshman girl tugged at his sleeve, thanking him for making her feel less alone. The hallway buzzed with excitement as students whispered about how Lucas had stood up to Ethan. Rounding the corner, Lucas encountered Principal Hawkins, her stern demeanor replaced with respect. She apologized, acknowledging Lucas's courage, and suggested he lead a new anti-intimidation initiative at Westfield. Overwhelmed but excited, Lucas agreed, realizing this was his chance to make lasting change. As they discussed the initiative, Sarah approached, her eyes shining with pride. She hugged Lucas tightly, her support unwavering. In that moment, Lucas noticed a new warmth in Sarah's eyes, deepening their bond. The moment was interrupted by a commotion near the entrance. Ethan stood there, his face contorted in fury. But when their eyes met, it was Ethan who looked away first, realizing the power had shifted. He pushed through the doors and disappeared into the night, his bravado shattered. The crowd around Lucas grew, with students eager to join the anti-intimidation initiative. Ideas flowed, from peer support groups to empathy workshops, and Lucas felt a deep sense of belonging. As the janitor signaled it was time to leave, Lucas and Sarah walked towards the exit together. The cool night air greeted them as they stepped outside, stars twinkling overhead. "So how does it feel to be the hero of Westfield High?" Sarah teased. Lucas chuckled, brushing off the title, but Sarah stopped him, insisting that his actions took real courage and had changed the school for the better. She kissed his cheek softly, leaving Lucas touched and filled with hope. Standing there, Lucas felt the weight of the past lift. The future, once bleak, now stretched before him with endless possibilities. The night was quiet, but Lucas knew that his journey was just beginning, and with friends like Sarah by his side, he was ready for whatever came next. The morning sun filtered through the windows of the newly repurposed classroom, where Westfield High's first peer support group meeting was about to start. Lucas stood at the front, gripping his cane, and surveyed the students gathered, each one sharing a mix of nerves and eagerness. "Welcome, everyone," Lucas began, his voice steady despite his nerves. This is a safe space where we can share our experiences and support each other." A reassuring nod from Sarah near the door bolstered his confidence. As the meeting progressed, students started to open up. Alex, once a quiet freshman, confessed, "I felt so alone, but seeing Lucas stand up to Ethan made me realize I didn't have to suffer in silence." Megan, who had once gone along with Ethan's cruel jokes, admitted, "I used to think being popular meant going along with the crowd. I want to learn how to be a better ally." Lucas listened, offering support, feeling a deep sense of purpose as he realized this was more than just a club. It was the start of real change. After the meeting, Principal Hawkins approached Lucas with exciting news. "Other schools in the district are interested in our anti-intimidation initiative. Would you be willing to speak at a district-wide assembly next month?" Lucas, both excited and nervous, agreed, his mind already buzzing with ideas. Sarah, catching up to him, teased, "Look at you, Mr. Inspirational Speaker." Lucas laughed, still in disbelief at how much had changed. "I still can't believe all of this is happening," he admitted. As they walked down the hallway, Lucas noticed subtle changes in the school's atmosphere. Students who once avoided eye contact now greeted him with waves and smiles. Near his locker, Jamie approached, nervously thanking Lucas not only for saving him, but for inspiring him to stand up to Ethan. "Maybe I could help with the peer support group," Jamie offered. Lucas, touched by Jamie's courage, replied, "Your voice matters, Jamie. We'd be lucky to have you." As Jamie left, Sarah remarked, "You're really good at this, helping people, making them feel heard." Walking to their next class, Lucas reflected on how far he'd come from the scared, isolated boy he once was. The cane in his hand, once a symbol of weakness, now felt like a badge of honor, a reminder of the strength he'd discovered within himself. The bell rang, marking the start of another school day. But for Lucas, it felt like the beginning of something much bigger. Surrounded by friends and filled with quiet pride, Lucas felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Lucas stood at the podium, his cane resting against the wooden frame as he surveyed the packed auditorium. The faces before him were a sea of expectant eyes, waiting to hear his story. He took a deep breath, steadying his nerves before launching into the speech that had brought him here, to this moment of triumph. "A month ago, I was invisible," he began, his voice strong and clear. "Today, I stand before you as living proof that change is possible, that one voice can make a difference." As he spoke, Lucas felt a warmth spreading through his chest. The words flowed effortlessly, each syllable charged with the power of his journey. He recounted the darkest moments, the taunts and isolation, but also the unexpected allies and the strength he'd found within himself. The audience hung on his every word, their expressions shifting from shock to admiration as his tale unfolded. After the speech, Lucas found himself surrounded by a throng of well-wishers. Teachers, students, and even local news reporters clamored for his attention. "Lucas, your story is incredible," gushed Mrs. Patel, her eyes shining with pride. "You've inspired so many of us to take action against intimidation and oppression." He smiled, still slightly overwhelmed by the attention, but feeling a sense of purpose he'd never experienced before. Back at school, the changes were palpable. The hallways, once a gauntlet of fear, now buzzed with friendly chatter. Students who had never given Lucas a second glance now greeted him warmly, some even asking for advice on dealing with their own struggles. He couldn't help but marvel at the transformation, both in his surroundings and within himself. One afternoon, as Lucas was updating his blog, a notification pinged on his laptop. It was a message from a reader in another state. "Your words gave me the courage to stand up for myself. Thank you for sharing your story." Lucas felt a lump form in his throat as he read the message. He'd started the blog as a way to process his own experiences, never imagining it would reach so far beyond the walls of Westfield High. Sarah plopped down next to him, peering at the screen. "Another fan letter?" she teased, but her eyes were soft with affection. Lucas nodded, still a bit dazed. "It's just... "I never thought I could make a difference like this," he admitted. Sarah squeezed his hand, her touch sending a pleasant tingle up his arm. "Well, I always knew you had it in you," she said softly. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the world around them seemed to fade away. As the weeks passed, Lucas found himself juggling schoolwork with speaking engagements and advocacy work. He'd been invited to participate in a statewide task force on intimidation prevention, and his blog had caught the attention of a major publishing house. It was exhilarating and exhausting in equal measure, but Lucas wouldn't have traded it for anything. For the first time in his life, he felt like he was exactly where he was meant to be. One evening, as he sat on his front porch watching the sunset, Lucas reflected on how far he'd come. The weight of his cane in his hand no longer felt like a burden, but a reminder of his strength. He knew there would be more challenges ahead, more battles to fight. But as he looked out at the golden horizon, Lucas Thompson felt ready for whatever the future might bring. The invisible boy had found his voice, and he was determined to use it to create a world where no one would ever have to feel alone or powerless again. The crisp autumn air nipped at Lucas's cheeks as he made his way across the school parking lot. The familiar tap of his cane against the asphalt was drowned out by the excited chatter of students returning from summer break. As he approached the main entrance, a hush fell over the crowd. Lucas followed their gaze to see a familiar figure standing awkwardly by the steps, hands shoved deep in his pockets. Ethan. It had been months since Lucas had last seen his former tormentor. Ethan looked different now. Gone was the cocky swagger and the sneer that had once seemed permanently etched on his face. In its place was a hesitant, almost sheepish expression. Their eyes met, and for a moment, neither moved. Then, with visible effort, Ethan took a step forward. "Hey, Lucas," Ethan said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Can we talk?" Lucas felt a mix of emotions churning in his stomach. Anger, fear, and something he couldn't quite name. He nodded, gripping his cane a little tighter as they moved to a quiet corner of the courtyard. The crowd of onlookers dispersed, but Lucas could feel their curious glances. Ethan took a deep breath, his shoulders slumping as if carrying an invisible weight. I wanted to apologize," he began, his words halting and unsure. "What I did to you, to everyone, it was wrong. I know saying sorry doesn't fix anything, but I needed you to know that I understand now. The counseling, it made me see things differently." He paused, swallowing hard. "I don't expect forgiveness, but I'm trying to be better." Lucas studied Ethan's face, searching for any sign of the old cruelty or manipulation. But all he saw was genuine remorse and a vulnerability he'd never associated with Ethan before. "Why now?" Lucas asked, his voice steady despite the turmoil of emotions inside him. Ethan's gaze dropped to the ground. "I saw your speech online," he admitted. "Hearing how my actions affected you, it hit me hard. I couldn't keep living with myself knowing the pain I'd caused." As Ethan spoke, Lucas felt the anger that had simmered inside him for so long begin to soften. It didn't disappear entirely, but it was tempered by a new understanding. People could change. Wasn't that what he'd been fighting for all along? "I appreciate your apology, Ethan," Lucas said finally. "I can't say I forgive you completely, not yet, but I believe you're trying, and that means something." Relief washed over Ethan's face, followed quickly by determination. "I want to make things right," he said earnestly. "Not just with you, but with everyone I hurt. I've been volunteering at the community center, trying to give back somehow." Lucas nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "That's a good start," he replied. As they parted ways, Lucas felt a weight lift from his shoulders, one he hadn't even realized he'd been carrying. Later that day, as Lucas recounted the encounter to Sarah over lunch, he was surprised by the mix of emotions playing across her face. "I don't know if I could be as forgiving as you," she admitted, her brow furrowed. "After everything he did," Lucas nodded, understanding her hesitation. "It's not about forgetting," he explained. "It's about giving someone the chance to be better. Isn't that what we've been fighting for all along?" As the weeks passed, Lucas watched Ethan's slow journey towards redemption with a mixture of caution and hope. There were setbacks, old habits dying hard, and trust being a fragile thing to rebuild. But there were also moments of genuine progress. Ethan joined the peer support group, at first sitting silently in the back, but gradually finding the courage to share his own struggles and listen to others. The road ahead was long, but Lucas couldn't help but feel a sense of pride in the small steps of change he was witnessing. The warm June sun streamed through the windows of Westfield High's auditorium, casting a golden glow over the sea of caps and gowns. Lucas sat in the front row, his cane resting against his leg, as he listened to Principal Hawkins deliver her commencement speech. Her words washed over him, but his mind was elsewhere, replaying the whirlwind of events that had brought him to this moment. "And now," Principal Hawkins announced, her voice cutting through Lucas's reverie, "I'd like to invite this year's valedictorian to the stage, a student who has not only excelled academically, but has also shown us the true meaning of courage and resilience. Please welcome Lucas Thompson." The auditorium erupted in applause as Lucas made his way to the podium, each step a reminder of how far he'd come. As he faced his classmates, Lucas felt a surge of emotions. Gone was the nervous, self-conscious boy who had once dreaded public speaking. In his place stood a young man filled with purpose and quiet confidence. "Fellow graduates," he began, his voice strong and clear. "When I started at Westfield High, I was invisible. I thought my story didn't matter. But I've learned that every voice counts, every story has power." Lucas's eyes swept across the audience, taking in the familiar faces. There was Sarah, beaming with pride, and Jamie, who gave him an encouraging nod. Even Ethan was there, sitting towards the back, his expression a mix of respect and lingering regret. "Our experiences here have shaped us," Lucas continued, "but they don't define us. It's what we choose to do with those experiences that matters. We have the power to create change, to make our world a little bit better each day." As he concluded his speech, Lucas felt a sense of completion. The journey that had started in fear and isolation had led him here, to a place of strength and connection. The thunderous applause that followed was more than just a recognition of his words. It was a celebration of transformation, both his own and that of the school community he had helped to reshape. Later, as Lucas mingled with his classmates at the graduation party, he found himself overwhelmed by the outpouring of gratitude and well wishes. "Your story changed my life," a quiet sophomore told him, eyes shining with emotion. "You made me believe I could stand up for myself." Similar sentiments echoed throughout the evening, each one a testament to the ripple effect of his actions. As the night wore on, Lucas found a quiet moment to slip away from the crowds. He made his way to the school's main entrance, where it had all begun. The steps where he had once been tripped and taunted now felt like a monument to perseverance. He ran his hand along the cool metal of the railing, lost in thought. "Quite a view, isn't it?" Sarah's voice startled him out of his reverie. She joined him on the steps, her graduation gown billowing slightly in the warm evening breeze. "I was just thinking about how different everything looks now," Lucas admitted, gesturing to the school behind them. Sarah nodded, understanding in her eyes. "You know," she said softly, "you didn't just change the school, Lucas. You changed all of us. You showed us what real strength looks like." As they sat there, watching the sun set on their high school years, Lucas felt a profound sense of peace. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he knew he was ready to face them. The invisible boy had found his voice, and it would continue to echo long after he'd left these halls behind. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel. Now, how about another one? To watch another nice story, just click on the video appearing on your screen.